The Civil War ended slavery in the U.S. In its aftermath, the 13th Amendment to the Constitution was passed, abolishing slavery. The era of Reconstruction promised advances for African Americans, particularly the formerly enslaved in the southern states. The 14th and 15th Amendments to the Constitution, passed in 1868 and 1870, established equal rights of citizenship, equal protection, and voting rights for all male citizens. Congress passed the Civil Rights Act of 1875, outlawing discrimination in public accommodation. But the national election of 1876 marked a sharp reversal, the end of Reconstruction, and a revival of white political dominance in the South. White supremacy was reaffirmed when states disenfranchised black citizens, and white people terrorized any black person who would openly assert their equality. The judicial system followed suit when the Supreme Court overturned the Civil Rights Act in 1883 and affirmed separate but equal segregated education in 1896. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, white supremacy was inscribed indelibly into the national culture, as racism was increasingly fashionable, or as we might say, normalized, in entertainment, literature, even in science. This low point for African American experience in the United States became a critical moment for the development of the black church. The largest black denomination was formed as the National Baptist Convention in 1895. Its membership surpassed both the two white Baptist denominations. By 1916, it was the third largest religious body in the U.S., behind only the Catholics and the Methodist Episcopal Church. The black church had for some time provided a place for nurturing life against the assaults of a racist system. As this dominant system became increasingly hostile and impervious to reform, African Americans turned to the organizations that were available to them to work for their own uplift and to slowly but surely build resources for resistance to white supremacy. But these institutions were not ready-made. They had to be built. Much of the work of sustaining religious life in the black churches, including financial support, was contributed by women. And yet these churches, like their white counterparts, were uniformly headed and run by men. From the beginning of the National Baptist Convention, women struggled for recognition of their key role and to build autonomous space to develop their gifts and pursue their distinctive goals. In 1900, their efforts established the Women's Convention as an auxiliary and semi-independent body. This national organization would work to draw black church women from diverse backgrounds into a common task: the expression of a social gospel, a religion to restore not only the souls, but the bodies of black folk by working for visible change in their material conditions, and challenging the communal, oppressive realities that damaged both body and soul. The leaders of the Women's Convention were many, but Nannie Helen Burroughs stands out as a key personality and engine of the organization's mission for more than half of the 20th century. She was corresponding secretary from its founding in 1900 and only left that position in 1948 when she became president, a role she served until her death in 1961. She was gifted in many areas, including practical organizing and in communication, where she was widely hailed for her incisive writing and her challenging and often inspirational oratory. In 1909, Burroughs founded the National Training School for Women and Girls in Washington, D.C. The school would be among the key ministries of the Women's Convention as a forming ground for young women, a place not only to train them for meaningful work and to secure financial stability, but also to shape character and form a sense of Christian mission for the reform of public and private life. At the center of the early work of Burroughs and the Women's Convention was a project the historian Evelyn Brooks Higginbotham has called the politics of respectability. The mantra of the Bible, the bath, and the broom was Burroughs' way of stressing a need to cultivate, refine, and advertise an African American culture of manners and moral rectitude. The aim of the project was not simple moralism, but rather resistance to the racist narratives promulgated by white supremacy. The caricatures of black folk in general as morally deficient, and of black women in particular as those chiefly responsible for this deficiency. African American respectability politics, as Higginbotham said, reflected and reinforced the hegemonic values of white America. But it also, and at the same time, subverted and transformed the logic of race and gender subordination. In an era when the dominant public discourse portrayed black folk in exclusively negative images, and violence against black lives ran rampant in South and North, the language of respectability, of moral and intellectual striving and excellence, allowed Burroughs and other black female religious and social reformers to establish not only black parity with whites, but black superiority over those who would oppress and maintain an unjust system. Burroughs and her sisterhood pursued a Christian agenda of reform and justice. They argued for and struggled to create an equal place, black equality with whites in America, and in time, a fully integrated place, a place of welcome that would overcome the dividing lines of race, color, gender, and class. They worked not only on strictly religious goals, but sought political access, notably by pushing strenuously for the right of women to vote, and then in time for the overcoming of Jim Crow restrictions on voting rights. It was a sisterhood, often of nameless, unrecognized women, working both locally and through the Women's Convention Network, nationally, to sustain hope and make steady progress. Progress that would eventually bear fruit in civil rights laws passed nearly a century after the end of the Civil War.